really appreciate all of you being able to jump on to give your expertise and be a resource for these parents that are out there. I'm going to start by just jumping into a couple questions that me and Zara kind of put down. And like I said, for everyone that's listening or watching on Facebook Live, go ahead and type in your comments, type in your questions, right? We might start talking about some things that you have questions about or doesn't necessarily make sense, or something you're struggling with, or how to apply those things. Please jump in the comments, write your questions so that we can really make this informative for you. So first question, I'm going to kind of take it to a macro picture, like a big picture. Obviously, with all of the changes and things that are happening right now in the world, where do you see education going? Where do you see our education system moving? What systems are in place that need to change? I really just want to hear each of your individual thoughts on what you think the next step is, or where this transition is going to take us. Deanna, I'm going to start with you first.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you asked that question. I'm on a nonprofit board for an organization called Haiti Partners. And if you're familiar at all with Haiti, Haiti is, one of the worst and most hard-hit regions of our globe. And yet, there is an organization that I work with where they are tiering their approach to education. I'm also on an organization called Operation Neighbor Care Philly, and I can see where America is getting stuck with its educational approaches, and where a place like Haiti has the freedom to do some things that are different. And I'll just highlight one example for you. As Pennsylvania, which is the state that I'm in, was shutting down, as we were trying to mobilize what this meant for education, a lot of the families were wanting to quickly jump online and get access to their curriculum from their teachers in Philadelphia. Because Philadelphia school district says we have to have equity, they did not allow for online learning initially, because not everybody had access to online learning. I agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that process. However, in Haiti, and this is where I had a board meeting just on Saturday, they have a tiered approach. For students who have access, they give digital lessons. For students who only have phones, they text the lessons along with a paper or supplemental material. And for kids who don't have any access to that, they give paper material. So in other words, nothing stopped the education. And this is in Haiti. Nothing stopped the education in one school called Haiti Partners Children's Academy, because the teachers said, we will tier our learning. Of course, it's not equitable. A large majority of Haiti is not equitable to the rest of the globe when it comes to access to things. However, in this community, there's about 350 students from pre-K to 5th grade. They are making sure that every single child in that school continues to get the education. So for me, I see in the United States, we have to start to think about what does it necessarily mean to have access, or can we begin to educate people from a tiered approach and be okay with tiering until there's access? Now, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Comcast gifted every family in Philadelphia a device, I believe a Google Chromebook, for kids who were in school. So that was a great thing. There were times where schools could go and pick up their devices and do things like that. Now you have parents who are faced with, like, how do I operate this device? And is that causing a delay in the learning because the parent and the child are struggling with how to function with the device? I do know there are handouts of paper curriculum as well, but I think education is going to have to begin to think about a multi-tiered approach, a multi-learning approach, which I often think and have discovered as a homeschool mom that not everybody learns the same. I do know that some kids seem to be doing quite well online, and they weren't doing as well in class, maybe with the disruptions, disruptions and things like that. So I think it'll be very interesting to think about education in that arena.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point, to be honest, because one of the things that I've talked about, and me and Zara have talked about a bunch with when it comes to the education system, is the individual learner, right? It's this holistic approach of, like, everyone has to learn the exact same way. and that doesn't really help every single student. And I think during this period, now it's when we can get to more of, like you said, that multi-learning, that tiered approach of really being direct with a child to know what their skills are, or what we need to work on for them specifically. I think that can be a great thing that comes out of this. So that's amazing, Deanna. Go ahead. Can you chime in on that same sentiment? Where do you think things
Totally.
go?
I love this example that Deanna shared, because a few weeks ago, someone tagged me on LinkedIn about a similar situation in California. So the parent, she was really frustrated because her children are already enrolled in a very non-traditional school, which is an online school. But because of the coronavirus and some students who do not have access to the internet, and the online school was being forced by the state to close. I'm like, and the mom, she was so frustrated because everything was going okay. Their children are learning and it's an online school, and now nobody can learn, even though like they technically didn't really get affected. So I love that tiered approach. So my answer to the question is, I'm as an educator myself, I work with other educators. And my teaching career really started when I actually started using social media and technology as a tool to enhance teaching and learning. And I work with some schools in the K-12 space, and I see that many schools, they haven't invested in the time and resources to upskill their teachers in terms of their knowledge and skill and experience with social media and technology. And so a really simple solution that many schools they do is that they ban social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, and students, they don't allow students to use that. They don't train their teachers how to use those tools. And they argue that social media or technology is the root of the problem. And I totally disagree. I think, technology is not the root of the problem, but pedagogy is, meaning that how we are using social media, how we are using technology is the problem. But if we never educate the teacher, and the teacher will never educate the students, so if we do that, so many students will continue to perceive technology or social media as very detrimental to their mental health, to their career, and to only play games, to be entertained. But my career, my life, and I see that in my own children. My children are very young, 5 and 8 years old, and we use social media all the time as a way to learn, to network, to build a personal brand. So that's kind of my answer. Schools need to take advantage of this opportunity, this crisis, to wake up. It's time that we actually invest in our teachers, not always invest in technology, which is also important, but actually also upskilling our teachers, our staff, to understand what is going on. So that's my first point. The second point I want to mention to answer that question is that I see so many parents, they completely outsource their children's education to a school. I think that is very wrong, and that is irresponsible. I know parents have a lot going on in their lives. I totally understand. But if you truly care about your children's career, their life, how they are going to grow up, and you have to, spend a lifetime watching Netflix, use some of that time to invest in learning what is going on, how today's education is so different. Are my children being prepared by the traditional school curriculum to be ready for life, to be ready for the future? And I'm telling you, research has been showing that the traditional education is not preparing our children. So what needs to be supplemented? And no school, no teacher understand our children better than the parents. So parents need to be educated, and school needs to invest in their teachers.
That's so important, and that's so great, right? Like just the fact that demonizing technology, we see it happen all the time. Can we now, though, empower the teachers, the educators, to embrace technology, to then pass that message down to children? Like, no, it's not get off your phone is horrible, you can't touch social media, but no, this is how you use it. This is what to search for. This is how to search. This is how to interact. If we can start doing those things, again, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. So Karla, jump in there. Tell me kind of your thoughts on where education's going.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say there are three entities that are very slow to change, and they're the most influential entities in our lives. First of all, religion. The church is slow on change. Nobody wants to change. Second, the government. Have you ever tried going to the DMV? Even right now with the COVID, impossible situation. And third is education. Very slow to change, yet we're preparing students for the future and for the 21st century. So taking that all into consideration, I have been in all of those entities. I started off in a public school, I went to charter school, and currently I'm in a private school. It's called Southlands Christian School in America, but it's also known as Southlands Schools International abroad. We are in several different countries. And so I'm in a organization that's both religious, has education, and has to deal with the government. All three things that are very slow to change. But the way education is going, what I see, and especially because of the whole COVID situation, that it has forced us out of the brick and mortar system. And we've been seeing that transition for the last 10, 15 years anyway. Once online popped up and we were able to buy things online, find out information online, communicate online, the brick and mortar system for retail businesses was dying. But with the COVID, it just pulled with the COVID situation, it put a nail in the coffin and it booted out schools out of the four brick walls. And that's something as a teacher I try to do, is take my students out of the classroom walls. Within the classroom walls, it is very unmotivating. But when you pull them into a real life situation, you will realize that classroom management is not an issue, because now you have the kids being motivated to do something that's genuine, that's real, that they can carry into life. So that's one of the ways I see education going, totally out of the brick and mortar system. Now, a lot of public schools and a lot of places will have to catch up, and sadly, many of them will close down. Another thing is we're going online. That's just the nature of the beast. That's the truth of the matter. Everything is heading to online. We're going into a more effective, a more communicative society. Now people are working from home and they're loving it. Where before it was a foreign concept. How can I work from home, or how can I work while I'm laying on the side of a beach? Well, now COVID has proved it's possible to be on this, if you could get to a beachfront, if they didn't close it, you can work from home. So now that concept is no longer foreign, and employers are seeing that it's more efficient to have people work from home because it takes care of the whole babysitting issue. Thirdly, I just want to give you a little snapshot of what my school did in response to this whole pandemic that is happening. We went into distant learning. Friday, March the 13th, we received the mandate to stay at home. Our school, brick and mortar, closed. Tuesday, March the 17th, we transitioned over 500 students to distant learning online. They followed the exact same schedule they had on campus, and they have not missed a beat. My kids have not missed one lesson. They have not missed one homework. We did not miss a beat. We went from brick and mortar to online, 500 kids seamlessly. Why? Because we were, first of all, prepared. And another thing about teaching teachers is that you need entrepreneurial teachers. It's not enough to teach teachers to teach a student. If we're training our students for 21st century skills, shouldn't the trainers have the 21st century skills? Let's start there. So a lot of schools are suffering, not only because they have an anti-technology mindset, but they have an anti-entrepreneurial mindset. You see, they pay teachers to come in from 8 to 3, and that's all they got. You have to pay a teacher to work from 8 to 3, but that teacher's mindset have to be like, I'm going to work till the job is done, and not only till the job is done, till I knock it out the park, period. Yeah. So even with moving online, we have teachers who are struggling because they are not thinking outside the box. They're still within that 4 brick wall called the classroom. And until our mindset changes as a society in education, that entrepreneurship is not just for starting a business. Entrepreneurship is not just for launching some kind of startup, but it's really for everybody, down to the smallest learner could be an entrepreneur. I'm currently working on a book called The Entrepreneurial Employee, because you don't have to go out there and start a business from scratch. You could teach from the classroom walls, or literally online now, and still be entrepreneurial in the way you approach education. 21st century skill. What are they? We say them as a sexy word, But what are they really? Communication skills. Are my students able to communicate, whether it's through technology, whether it's through social media, whether it's through a paper, whether it's through face-to-face? Is that possible? Are they innovative? Can they think of something to change without being prodded to change? Absolutely. Are they creative? Are they creative individuals? And creativity goes along with critical thinking skills, mind you. So it's not just for math, but for example, can I take my child and drop him off in the middle of a desert and he survive at least 24 hours? That's creativity. That's problem solving skills. And until we really get under the hood and build our teachers in those areas that we're trying to teach our children, even with technology, we will fall flat. Absolutely. We will. And that's just the truth of the matter. And that is where education is being forced to go out of the 4 brick walls onto online, but beyond just online, because I can give my student a piece of paper online and they still wouldn't get it. Okay. So where are we how are we teaching them to think is important. And yes, it starts with the trainer. So unless we really take the concept that the business world have applied to the classroom through our teachers, we're going to repeat the same mistakes even online.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Karla. You're, man, hitting the nail on the head, right? You're saying, you guys are saying the right stuff, saying all the things that I know we're all thinking about. Let me kind of keep moving down that same path though. Is this going to be more on the parents moving forward, or do you think this is more on the educators? Deanna, I'm going to open this up to you. Do you think that with these soft skills and things that really is what we're trying to get into kids, do you think that's going to now fall on the parents?
I think in some ways, yes. I mean, it's interesting when I wrote the curriculum for Milton Hershey School on problem solving, on effective communication, on empathy. A lot of the house parents said, wow, you want us to teach this to the kids, like us adults need this, you know? Yeah. So like they felt, the ones who got behind it said, I feel that I need some of these skills myself. I don't adjust well. I only want it to be my way. And I have a student home with 12 kids and they are different. So how do I make sure that I adjust for all of those kids? And how do I learn to have some empathy? So it goes without saying that I think it was, I mentioned it yesterday on my Facebook Live, to teach is to learn twice, right? So we learn the content ourselves, but then we go and teach it and we think we have this grand lesson. Like we're like, woohoo. And 10 of the 12 people are looking at you like, what? And you go, what happens usually in school, in traditional school, the students are the problem. As a parent, you can't say that. Like you have to go, well, I obviously did not hit it home the way I thought I should have with, little Johnny or whatever. Sure. And so the parent has to learn to adjust. I think that there are parents now who are struggling with, wow, my child got great grades at school. Number one, hats off to the teachers. They're probably like bowing down to, the Lord of the teachers who are there, who actually have classrooms that are quite large. But at the same time, I think parents are also learning, like, how do I learn to do this for my child? Become the number one encourager for my child, but also the innovator, the one where you just kind of completely dismantle the lesson and say, what really is it that child needs to learn right now? So for me, when it comes to teaching my kids, it's, the structure of writing or learning some lessons in math. But part of it to me is I'm trying to get better at it, but I used to be the one that told the child what to do every step of the way. The best way for me to educate my children now is for them to figure out how to figure it out. That's the greater skill that I'm giving. And it sounds like I'm just leaving them to just do, I'm more of a coach now, like 2, 3, 4, 5, these points are ways that you could be looking at this answer or this circumstance instead of giving them kind of like the exact answer for a problem. And so I do think that parents are going to have to learn and be okay with their child struggling. In the midst of me writing this curriculum, it was around 2014 that I launched it. We're, at the height of this like helicopter parenting, right? And some of you all know what I'm talking about when we have parents who hover a little too much. It shows up in certain ways. I live in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where You know, I'm not in the inner city, and so there are parents who will ask the teacher and maybe overhelp or overdo. And then there are, if you're in other cultures or other organizations where you have parents who the child isn't sure what to do, and so then the parent calls the teacher, and it's the teacher's fault, you know, for their child not learning. Both extremes are wrong. You know, like you doing it for the child or you blaming the teacher, it really is the child that needs to learn. And I think that those 21st century skills have to be hammered home a lot more. So yeah, I'm not really sure. I think in the long run, digitally, I think, as you mentioned, as several of you mentioned before, it's not just going to be the technology that's going to educate our kids. It's going to be the child who's going to have to figure it out in their own way, and the parent being that coach, or that parent being the person who can introduce them to mentors or other parenting groups, you know, to be able to do that themselves. My daughter goes on a study call with her other classmates, and she's learning music theory. So she's learning how to write music, and it's not her strong point. And so she's on a conversation with 4 other students. They did not call the professor, they called one another. You know, it's a study group online, just like they would get together, you know, in a regular dorm, and learning how to kind of, you know, she called all the right people, the people who knew what she didn't know. You know, right. That's what you do. You call the people who you don't and say, how did you get to that point? And so it might be that as parents, we facilitate that type of learning, where we get numbers and names of classmates and we say, let's schedule a call, and we encourage the kids to get on the call and ask questions, and to self-advocate for themselves. So there is going to be a role for parents, but in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious, have you been dealing with parents throughout this process as well, with starting Classroom Without Walls? What's been your take?
Totally. I resonate with so many points that Deanna mentioned. And I think, you know, I'm trying to tell parents that they don't need to feel pressured to teach their children everything. First of all, like, they don't know everything. Like for me, I have so many degrees. I don't know everything. I make mistakes all the time. And I just love the term, you know, facilitator. As a parent, we are a facilitator. We help to make things happen. We ask good questions. And I recently just finished reading this book titled A Brain Centric Design. And so they are talking about how we can teach in a way that makes sense to the students. So in that book, they shared 3 powerful reflection questions I can share with everyone. So question number 1 is, what is surprising about what you have just learned? And question number 2 is, what is something that you already knew, but now you are looking at it very differently with a new pair of eyes? And question number 3 is, what do you still need help with? So I love those 3 questions, because as a teacher, I'm guilty of asking my students this question: do you have any questions? Of course, like especially the older children, you know, in the college level. They don't want to look like, oh, look at me, I'm so stupid, I haven't figured this out. Everybody else, they don't have any questions. So I think as a parent, we want to be a good facilitator. We want to create a very safe learning space where children, they feel like, even if I say that, hey, mom or dad or teacher, I don't know this question, but they don't feel like I'm being judged. So those 3 questions, I have been using them at my own school and with my own children. So every time after a learning session is over, we do learn, reflect, and teach. And so after a learning session is over and we engage in those 3 discussion questions, and oftentimes I don't know what he's learning, and I'm not even interested in what he's learning. Like, he's really into Minecraft. I have 0 interest in Minecraft. But I ask those questions to help him deepen his learning, and then ask him, hey, after reflection, teach me. What is this about? What is this game about? If he can teach me, I knew that he actually internalized the knowledge. And I also want to kind of follow up on this. One person I really love, his name is Daniel Pink, and he talks about, you know, human learning, human transformation, 3 factors. One is mastery, and second one is autonomy. so important. And third one is purpose. Like education, learning is an inside out journey. And oftentimes as parents, we come in as a dictator instead of a collaborator or facilitator. We tell our children, this is a curriculum, this is what you need to learn, this hour you do this, that hour you do this. I don't think that is a very healthy approach. And as parents, we need to, and teachers, we need to help inspire our children to go within. What is something that you are interested in? And I think with homeschooling, we can do that because it is small enough to make this completely children-centered. Like my 8-year-old learns completely different from my 5-year-old, and they have totally different interests. So I design different things based on what they tell me. I tell them, this is a collaboration. If you want to make this fun, this is a collaboration. You have to tell me how you want to learn, what you want to do. And so I think, like shift that, from being a teacher, the sage on the stage, to a facilitator, a coach, and to make that happen. And to my final kind of point is, and there's another book I just finished reading, not writing, I wish I had a book, and reading, and her name is Esther Wojcicki, a foreign name, but she is the mother of 2 CEOs and 1 college professor. And one of the 2 CEOs is from YouTube. And she has this method called TRICK. And T stands for trust, R stands for respect, and I stands for independence, and the C stands for collaboration, and K stands for kindness. So I have been trying to implement that at home, and it really like, moving away again from that dictator to more like a coach facilitator.
That's great. That's great. And that makes perfect sense. Can you do me a favor? The first 3 questions to ask, can you go back through those again? What is it? What is
surprising about what you have just learned? And those 3 questions are based on neuroscience, behavioral science, and based on solid body of research. So what is surprising about what you have just learned? Second one is, what is something that you already knew, but now you are looking at it differently? And the third one is, what do you still need help with? So you really put the kid on the center. Hey mom, I'm really struggling with this. I still need help. And then you ask, okay, can you Google it? Can you figure it out? That's pretty much what I say every single day. Like, figure out, Google it, and yeah.
Yeah, and that's perfect because that goes a little bit back to what Deanna was saying about, right, just like letting them figure it out, right?
Totally.
Getting them to that place.
I mean, like, kind of another quick story. So I recently interviewed this kid who is a business entrepreneur. He started his business when he was 13 years old and grew that into a seven-figure business by the time he was 17. I was asking him, I was like, what did your parents do? You're pretty amazing. He was like, my parents asked me to Google everything, to figure out everything.
That's it. And that's it. And so many parents can literally pick up that lesson right there, just about Googling, right? Just teaching them how to figure it out. Karla, I wanted you to jump in, but to kind of piggyback on something that I heard I say was, not being that dictator of the schedule, right? Of like this time and that time and that. And I know that you've done a great job getting your family on a schedule. Talk to parents about schedules and, what you think that, is the best course of action for putting a kid on a schedule.
Well, as far as putting a kid, the schedule is more for, it's a foundational thing. So, like I said, I taught in charter schools, and the great thing about charter schools is they were very innovative, thinking ahead. The downside to the charter school that I taught at, they were very disorganized. It was like Lego builders. Have you seen that movie? You just build it in the air.
Sure.
That's what they were. So they were doing amazing things, but they were building it in the air. Well, at some point you got to land, right? Gravity.
Yeah.
So what are you going to land on? So having a schedule is just a foundation. It's a tool. It's not the all-encompassing thing. It's just a tool, and kids need stability. So until a student or a child develop that habit of discipline, self-driven, self-control, they need to be on a schedule. That schedule will help them develop those qualities. The schedule also is for you, the parents, to be organized, because as we know, because of COVID, many parents are disorganized, disinterested, and disconnected from their kids' education. So parents, if you want to mentor your kids through this situation, you as well have to be organized, and a schedule give you that organization. Now, I'm a proud proponent. I like to launch off a foundation and then open my parachute. So I also like to wing it, but I need to know that when I land, I'm landing on the ground. So my schedule is the ground floor. That's all it is. It is the starting point and a ground floor, and then you build it or you launch from there. Just to kind of, I might be going off the trail a little bit here, but education needs to move from being just memorization to being mentoring. And parents are now being forced to mentor a child. And that is what it is. We are guiding a child on how to do Google search. We're guiding a child on how to use social media responsibly. We're guiding a child to find the information for whatever content they need to find the information for. That is mentoring. And that is what we are now being forced to do, is mentor our kids, to guide them. Don't give them everything. Give them just enough to get them started, and then you take them from there. My school I created a creative leadership curriculum. I've been working on it for over 10 years, and I finalized it last year. My school is piloting that program. And because I taught art, it's heavily art integrated, but it can be used for any subject. 25% of that curriculum is developing artistic ability. Nobody wants to go to the symphony and people can't play an instrument well, right? Same thing it is with art. I know people say there's expressionism. You can do all you want. You could give them a blank canvas and pretend there's something on it. It's all free expression. But the point of the matter, it's a skill and it's a tool that needs to be developed. So 25% of that curriculum has to do with developing artistic ability. I don't care if you're doing realistic painting or you're being an abstract artist or surreal artist. All of those skill sets are different and they have to be developed. Another 25% of that curriculum is research and content. Know your field. Know your field, right? Know your field. I mean, I can't stress it enough. Know your field. Don't just have a talent. Develop your field. So 25% of it is content and research, information. 50% of it is all 21st century skill, communication and all those skills. Why? Because once I develop a child in those areas and I give them enough content, they will produce whatever it is I want them or they want to produce, right? Teach a man to fish, I'll give him a fish. Education has given people fishes, or if that's a real word, fish, I guess. There's not a plural, right? I swear to God, I was a teacher. But now we're having to teach people not only to go fish, we're teaching them, make yourself a net, build yourself a boat. Don't wait around for somebody else to build it. You build it. They will come. Fields of dream, right? Build it. They will come. That's what we're teaching our kids to do, is build yourself a future. Ultimately, that is what education is supposed to do. Absolutely. Scheduling is just a start. And if you cannot master the scheduling, you cannot go to ground floor, right? When you put up a high rise, you got to start with the foundation. It could be gorgeous, but if the foundation is cracked, and it's not good, and granted, the foundation is not fun, right? It's not woohoo. It's not gorgeous. You never see it in a picture, right? But it's needed, and that's what scheduling is. And then you build from there. And everybody needs that, parents and children. My kids, they're 14 and they're 12 years old, and their bedtime is 9 o'clock. It's non-negotiable, 9 o'clock. Because I need a break from you, right? I've been parenting all day, and you need your rest because your body needs to recuperate and be ready for 8 o'clock session in the morning. So it's all about laying a great foundation, and then we can launch anywhere we want to launch.
I think that's so true, and it's so right, Karla. One of the things that I know this process is going to do is really put some more accountability on parents.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly what you said. We have to go from memorization to mentorship. I love that. Like, you should put that on a shirt. Talk about it like your
I will.
Right? Memorization to mentorship. It's so true. And a parent is going to need to step in to mentor. It's no longer going to be, I blame it all on the school, I blame it all on the teacher, they don't do this. It's going to be.
And Chris, can I jump in just real quick? One thing I didn't tell you during my introduction is that my son, who's 15, is dyslexic. Okay, so he struggles with the writing portion of dyslexia. So when you think of dyslexia, it really is this broad category that says problems with words or language. And for him, he's an avid reader. Most people think that if you're dyslexic, you can't read. He reads very well. His is writing. There's a lot of noise between his brain and him holding that pencil. You know, it's like, you know, all kinds of different things that he kind of goes through and struggles with. When I told him 3 years ago, because writing for him and spelling and all of those things are a challenge, I told him 3 years ago, I want you to write a creative story, and of course the eye rolling and you know, getting overwhelmed. I said, spelling and grammar do not count, just write. He wrote the most beautiful, the most creative, the most innovative story. I was blown away at what was in there. But because of the structure of grammar and the structure of a paper and writing, and I didn't indent the paragraph and I have to capitalize that, he would look at the screen and say, I know that word is spelled wrong. I really don't know how to spell it, but and I said, if you don't know what it is and how to spell it, tell me what it is that you wanted. And he told me what it was, and I corrected the spelling. And when we corrected his paper, it was a work of art. It was a genuine work of art. But he had mountains in the way, you know, and I think parents probably are discovering too, like, wow, my child is learning a little bit different, and what do I do about that? Just kind of getting rid of all of the walls and structure. And I just said, creative write. I know he's a creative kid. He tells all kinds of stories. He loves all kinds of stories. But to get it from his brain to the computer, structurally, it was, I'm gonna spell something wrong and it's not gonna sound right. And I had to just tell him, I don't care. I want to know what's in you. That has given him so much confidence to be able now to write. He no longer says to me, oh, I got to write something. He knows I don't care about spelling and grammar right now. I'll go in and I'll say, okay, you have a couple first names of people here that don't have capitals. Oh, yeah, mom. I mean, that's just something that he's going to, you know, always just about struggle with. And I'll say, look, you have a compound sentence. I don't see that you've put the commas in there. That stuff is later. To me, I wanted his ideas on the paper. I wanted him to live on the paper, and to be able to do that was freeing for me and for him, because it was sad for me to see that he struggled I'm an author. It was sad for me to see that he struggled with writing. Here it turns out he struggled with the mechanics of writing, but not being an author. So if that helps a parent out there that's listening, that you have permission to do things a little bit different so that you get the best out of your child, I'll be the first one to cheer you on with that. So anyway.
That's so awesome. Jump in. Go ahead. I saw you jump in.
Just something real quick. I love this story. Oh my God, what a great example. And I have another kind of to follow up on this. I recently read an article of a professor, and she shared that. And so she's also a writing professor, and she shared that the hardest challenge for her students is creative writing. And when she asked her students to write whatever you want to talk about, just write a story, and all the students would be like, look at the teacher like, what to talk about? So I want to use that as an example to illustrate, you know, oftentimes as teachers or parents, we are so obsessed with getting, you know, like the space, the line, the structure, the grammar, this, and that correct. And we are really hurting our students' ability to share a story, to be creative, to engage in creative writing, because they're so obsessed. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Like, nobody can write like that. Like, at least for me, I have to do free writing and then go back to revisit my grammar. So if for every single sentence I'm obsessed with being like correct or wrong, I wouldn't be able to write. So like when I was listening to her story and then thinking about that article I read of this professor, her struggle, her student like literally tell me what to write about. I don't know how to be creative. So I think we should really let go, like our, you know, not being a control freak, right? Yeah. Give students, our children, the autonomy and the freedom to just enjoy, you know, free flow of ideas.
That's it. That's it. And again, I think a lot of this is going to happen because parents are now going to be free to teach their kids the way that they need to, if they're willing to jump in and engage,
Yeah.
if they're willing to jump in and mentor, right? Right, Karla, go ahead.
Right, definitely if they're willing to do it. It's not easy work, it's very hard work. And that's why many parents will not do it. You know, it's an 80-20 rule. 20% of the people carry the load, 80% just sit around and do nothing. It's the same way within education. Even out of this whole epidemic, you will still have that 80-20% rule because people want it easy and they want it convenient. And teaching, educating, especially your own child, is definitely not easy and it's not convenient. You know, not only do I have my own 2 kids, for a while I raised 2 of my nieces. One of them had developmental issues. And then I've also been a home state parent, which means I've had students from other countries live in my family, from China mainly. And one thing I learned about all of these students is the 21st century skills, all the things that we're trying to instill in them in an academic arena, they already have. Have you ever sat and watched your kids play video games? Mind blowing, mind blowing. My son was born with a defect hand. His left hand only has 3 fingers. And it took him a lot longer to tie the shoes, close the door. As a toddler, all the things that comes naturally that you learn, it took him a lot longer to learn. But my gosh, even though he has 3 fingers, one of them being the thumb, put him on a video game, and now it's better that he has 3 fingers and not 5. Right? In other words, all the skills that we need the kids to learn are already built into them, and they use them on a daily basis if we pay attention to what our kids are doing, whether they're on TikTok, whether they're on playing video games, talking to somebody in another country. It really doesn't matter. When it's fun time, our kids pull all those skills together and implement it. Now we have to mentor them to implement it in a functional time. And that's where the discrepancy is. The skills naturally shows up in fun time, but when it's time for functional time, whether it's school or whether it's a career, that's when they don't know how to transfer the skills. So we need to bridge that gap and let them realize that it's the same skills they're using to accomplish their fun activity. They can also use it in the classroom, but that means parents and teachers also have to be flexible with the child's learning styles, with the child's skill level, and all the things that come in educating children. So again, as human beings, we are innately born with everything we need to be a successful adult. The problem is the adults that's supposed to cultivate it is not exactly up to par, right? And so it's a mindset change for everybody, and definitely for parents.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've gone for about an hour. You guys have given such value. Hopefully everyone that's paying attention is getting so much information, so much value. Again, if you have your own specific question, those of you joining us on Facebook Live, if you have your own question, please type it in. We want to be able to answer those questions for you. I had one follow-up kind of question to this, because I know a lot of parents right now are dealing with some anxieties of these things that you're talking about. Like, if you're just finding out that your child has a learning disability or doesn't learn the same, and now you're getting a chance to see it firsthand, I'm sure there's a ton of parents out there that are like, all right, well, what do I do? So I'm going to toss it to each of you. Just give these parents like that are dealing with that anxiety, like tell them maybe a couple things that they could be working on. Deanna, I'll start with you.
Okay, I would say just capitalize on your child's strengths. I know that that there are always going to be subjects that your child's not going to be good at. And actually you might say, wow, son, you got your math genius from me. Like, I didn't have math genius and neither do you. So that's where fun stuff like learning together. Khan Academy has some great things. There's some great apps. I pulled a couple of things off of my bookshelf. Everything you need to know about English language arts. I was not a great grammar teacher, even though I am an author. I know that probably in most of my books, I got dangling modifiers everywhere, but people like my books. And this one for math, it's a big fat notebook, middle school edition, just things that you can do and you can look up on your own. The other thing that I think someone wrote in the chat, Zara, you wrote in the chat, a child, just a way to keep them focused. What I did with my son is for every 20, 25 minutes he gives me in school, he can go outside and kind of shoot hoops and just get a lot of that energy, physical energy out. If your child does like to do things with their fingers, this is kind of a cute book. It's Paper Toy Monsters, and you can pull apart monsters and to build them. Just things that your child is able to do if they're really feeling a little bit of stress and anxiety, capitalize on their strengths. My son, who's not a good writer, is an amazing public speaker. So when he is not sure how to tell me what to show what he's learned through paper, I ask him. And when I hear him tell me what he's learned, he catches so much more than what I thought. And so like looking at a test and giving my child a paper test all the time doesn't always tell me what the child learned. Doesn't always tell me what they learned, but being able to ask them verbal questions about what they learned, being able to have them show me what they learned, I think is always better. But looking at the strengths of what your child operates in and building on that, it's really difficult because I think as a society, we tend to punish a child who has a weakness by having them retake something and redo something over and over again, and it's already difficult. We aren't really necessarily good at rewarding their strength, and so as a parent, rewarding a child's strength is actually good and innovative. So my son likes to free play. My husband sells on Amazon, so there's a lot of Amazon boxes everywhere. Last Christmas, we were snowbound and inside. He had some friends over and they built a tunnel system through our den, up the steps into the living room that they could all climb. He was like 13, but they all built like an indoor cave and different things. And it was just neat to see them get innovative. And with, they drilled a hole and had a little flashlight and they were in there like reading and doing some different things. So, and I actually enjoyed watching him play like that and figuring out what he was really good at and what he enjoyed. So allowing that to come up, like, and not just giving them like video games or school, something else that's like free play. Like you mentioned about free writing or free thinking. Free play is an innovative way for you to figure out how your child learns too, and their strengths and their weaknesses. Not sure if I answered the question to the best, but anyway.
No, that was great. That was great. Focus on strengths. Focus on strengths, right? Like that's super important. Right. I jump in there. How would you answer that?
Yeah, and recently I learned a new term, which is called the pedagogy of listening. And as teachers, parents, we frequently, what's the pedagogy of teaching? What is the best way to teach? But I think now is the time, if we really want to serve our students, especially at home, much smaller like class size. And I think we need to be a better listener, to really practice the pedagogy of listening. And oftentimes our children know exactly what they want, but we never have the patience to listen. Like my son, 8 years old, I'm really surprised by how much he already knows about how he prefers to learn. And so when this was just happened even prior to the coronavirus, and we were like, we need to do a workbook, this and that. In my mind, I kind of already designed the curriculum. So we give him this. He was like, this is not working. That's not working. I was like, wow, why this is not working? He is actually telling us is that I love collaborative learning. Like I didn't even force him. He told us like, I want to do this. I enjoy this, and that I don't like it. I was like, oh, that is really interesting. And I'm having a conversation with him. He is literally telling me how I should help him design his learning. And it was such an eye-opening experience because oftentimes we think, only teacher knows the best. Like parents, you will hear when you go pick up the kids, hey, listen to a teacher. Did you listen to the teacher? Always about listening to the teacher. Like I'm a teacher, I know. I really don't know everything. I'm a human being. And I think we need to shift that, to really listen to our children. What can we learn from our children? How do they prefer to learn? And we need to make learning personal. We absolutely have to make learning personal. And if our children think that learning is for mommy, is for daddy, is for that GPA, is for this and that, they're not interested. Like external motivation doesn't work. And they will give external motivation will give our children stress, anxiety. But if they are internally driven, they want to learn, intrinsic desire to learn, learning is fun. Like all of us, we love learning. I'm having so much fun on this webinar. I'm learning so much from everyone. I'm actually taking notes. It's fun. So you want our children to discover that learning is fun. You have to figure out ways to make it personal. A quick story, I will stop talking. So my son, we were trying to ask him to organize his clothes. It's like literally all over the place. We were nagging, like, mommy, daddy wants you to do this. Absolutely zero interest. It became so annoying for him and for us. And then eventually I figured out a way, we gamified a little bit, and he was like, yeah, this is for me. I'm interested. I'm determined to organize the clothes. It's like a different level of energy. So figure out ways to practice listening, to make learning personal to your child, so they want to do it, out of their heart.
So good. That's so good. And that's it, right? Make it personal. Make it personal for your child. So Karla, finish it out. What would you tell parents that are having some of that anxiety about like what to do with their children right now?
Well, if you have an anxiety, sit down and drink a glass of wine. That will help. No, I'm kidding. That does help too. But I'm kidding. Anxiety, first of all, embrace the anxiety. Anxiety is a natural emotion. Again, going back to technology, bad social media, we do that with anxiety, bad anxiety. Anxiety just makes you alert. It's kind of like the fight or flight factor, right? When your emotions realize or your body realize something is wrong, it becomes alert. And when you are alert is when you are at the sharpest. So you can utilize that anxiety to be very sharp, but you have to embrace it and say, okay, I'm really anxious about this. I don't know this. What do I need to know? You see the same thing we're teaching our kids, right? Just to piggyback off Addison there, the K and L, what I know, what I need to know, and what I've learned. It's called CNOL, right? What I know, what I need to know, and what I've learned. The parents have to take the same approach. Okay, I'm about to teach little Johnny. What do I know about what I'm about to teach him? What do I need to know? And what am I learning in the process? And if they follow the same steps that we're trying to get them to instill in their children, they'll have the same successful results. The important thing is asking questions. Asking yourself questions and asking your child questions, and asking questions that do not generate a yes and no answer. That does not give you any information. Questions like how and why, if you embed these questions into your lesson plan, start with a driving question. First, start with a hook, something that Johnny's interested in, that fires him up, but that you can connect it back to the lesson. Start with that hook. It could be anything, a video game. It really doesn't matter what the hook is, as long as it garners his attention. And then you have a driving question that will bridge the hook and the lesson plan. How did this come about? Why? Questions that he has to actually sit and think about versus yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Right? And then you follow those driving questions with sub-questions. So throughout your entire lesson plan, whatever it is that you're working on, you have these little questions that you can either discuss verbally if he's an auditory learner, or if he's more engaged in the writing process, he can write out his answer. If he's an artist, he can literally draw out his answer. If he's an athlete, then the same answer can be produced in a kinesthetic point perspective, but give him the freedom of choice to give you the answer in his learning style. That's how you gauge his success, and then follow it up with sub questions. And then before you close out a lesson, do a recap question. Okay, so going back to what we've learned, how has this helped you? How can you connect it to math? How can you take this English concept and connect it to science, and connect it to math, and connect it to art, and connect it to music, and connect it to sports? And now you have a cross-curriculum interchanging with one idea, but you can bridge that student. And now when they're sitting in the math class, they're not sitting there thinking like me, 1 + 1 is 5, I can't get it, and that formula does not make sense to me. Now they're thinking, okay, I solved something in English, how can it help me in math? Right. I solved something in science, how can it help me in geography? right? Because it's a skill set we're really training. The content will change, and the content we know becomes very useless, right? Ask me something about trigonometry. Don't know, right? It becomes useless. The content eventually becomes outdated. So it's not so much about the content as it is about the learning building blocks that we have to develop so that the student can access whatever content that need to be accessed at that particular time. So questions are a huge deal.
Yeah, Karla, you make a big point, because I think it then we start to discuss like what really is education.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, again, you know, there's a question here, Zara, that you mentioned about standardized tests, and I, you know, have a visceral reaction to standardized testing myself, because I think the thought process is, Karla, the content changes.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to education, we're never going to know everything there is to know about a certain subject, idea, or thought, but are we becoming good learners? And ultimately, when it comes to education, we're tasked with teaching our young people how to learn.
Yeah.
You know, not to necessarily perform. However, the performance has taken over the learning. And I think that also is the level of anxiety or stress that you mentioned on parents' minds, is how do I know that I'm going to teach my child enough that they learn? I'm really just the first year outside of me not, well, actually my daughter's senior year, she took 2 college classes in the area and ended up with A's in both of them. And I was like, oh, you know, like you get this thought, like, okay, like she's not just learning for me. She actually like can learn, you know, I'm being silly when I say that, but at the same time, it is a bit of relief, you know, like, have I transferred either this excitement and passion for learning, the curiosity to learn?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, a couple things that I'm listing here: curiosity, which is not a subject area, right? That's an innate skill. The stick-to-itiveness, the grit, you know, being able to work through tough problems. She's obviously figuring out how to ask questions. That is a skill set in learning, is learning how to ask the right questions. And then, you know, being able to collaborate with other people. That is actually the kind of children we want, right?
Yeah.
It just happens to be under this umbrella of learning right now. And I don't really think that the standardized testing arena allows for our children to display that. There's no collaboration in a standardized testing environment. The only way that you measure grit is the fact that you finished the test in the 2.5 hour, you know, got up early, drove to the testing site, and, you know, whatever. So it's interesting, you know, when we actually think about the content area that we're teaching our child, which as parents, we tend to also get stuck on, did they master the content? When really the question is, are they becoming good learners? Are they learning and enjoying what it means to learn?
Can I jump in for a second? When we think of the standardized tests, you know, our human civilization has gone through different era. We had the agrarian era, which means the agricultural area, where everyone was being trained to work on a farm. That was the economy of back then. That's where slavery came in. It was a needed, people wouldn't, you know, necessarily agree with me, but back then slavery was cheap labor. So it was needed for an agrarian culture, for an agricultural culture. And so people were trained to think agriculturally. And then at the turn of the 19th century, we moved into the industrial age, the Industrial Revolution. Out of the Industrial Revolution is where the standardized tests came, because people were being trained to work in factories. So you got to put a round peg into a round hole, and you got to know how to do it precisely and on time. So when you look at the standardized test, it reflects an industrial age revolution, because people were made for factories. And then we moved from the industrial age revolution, and we moved into an age of information. Right? So now information is at our fingertips. So now that industrial revolution, that brick and mortar is not working anymore, right? Because information can be accessed. They have something called citizen scientists. Those are individuals who are scientists that did not go to school for any type of science. They do not have a degree in any of the scientific fields, yet they are experts and leading experts in the scientific world. Why? Because of the age of information. They were able to access all the information about a given scientific field and master it because of they had the building blocks of learning. So now that we have the age of information pretty much set, you can get anything online, and that's just going to keep expanding. Our society is now moving into a very mobile, digital age. So now our content, in other words, is changing. We went from agriculture to industrial, right, to information, to mobile and digital. The content is changing, but if you notice throughout history, the men and the women who have been successful are the ones who can go in between all those content and still be relevant.
Absolutely.
So it's not about the content, it's about the life skills or the learning skills or the building block skills that were able to take you from one place to another. If we develop those things in our children starting in preschool, then their learning, unless they were born with some actual disability, would not be an issue. But then again, if the parents and the teachers don't have that type of skills developed within themselves, we only produce what we are.
Yep.
We can't produce higher than what we are.
Yep, very true, very true. Man, we've said so much today, and I want to be able to kind of wrap this conversation up because, again, you ladies have given so much value. I'm going to toss it to my wife, though, because I said for everybody that was on Facebook Live that maybe had questions, I want to see if we can get just one last question. So babe, if you could unmute yourself, and then if we have one question that we've gotten from either Facebook Live or that you have that you can give as our last question, babe, go for it.
Yeah, I think this last question, I think everyone's pretty much explained, what parents should be focusing on, which is, less subjects, or making sure you're teaching your children, properly on each specific subject, and more focusing on teaching your children effectively learning something. And also, some of the more basic life skills during this time, like dealing with the anxiety and the fear and the worry, and dealing with not being able to be around friends and so on and so forth. So I think we've covered all of that. I think what we could answer, which is an ongoing question, is systematically, and I know this changes by state, but systematically, is there any sort of advice that we can give people? I'd say let's choose a state, maybe like Pennsylvania, and then something like California, since we have someone in California, and then we have two people here in Pennsylvania. Systematically, if we could answer the question, what will parents need to know as far as when the school system starts back up again? Will students most likely have to redo some of this time, or will it just kind of start again next year? What will happen system-wise and I guess grading system-wise? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but more like system-oriented. What's going to happen with this time that was now lost? Will it have to be made up?
If I can answer that, that would be great.
Yeah.
Right now, as we stand, not even the public school know exactly what they're going to do. Students right now entering college do not have to take the SATs and the ACTs. They're just going to consider that a wash. So right now they're trying to figure out what they need to do. We do know, going back post-COVID, that people are going to be more socially conscious, and that social distancing is going to become part of the norm. So that means our classroom, public school and other schools, have to look differently. That also means that there's only so many people you can put in a classroom if you want to enforce some type of distancing code. Going back to online will become a huge tool and asset to future learning. As far as students who are currently being affected, their learning gaps are going to happen at a greater pace during this time now, because although my kids have not missed a beat, they check in every day with all of their teachers. They see their friends every day on Zoom. They have classroom-like normal through Zoom. Most schools are not doing anything right now. Students are just home sitting around, or they have very little schoolwork. So we're seeing the learning gap being widened. And so going back, we will have to answer the question of remedial classes. How can we go back and correct those learning gaps? And so you will see a lot of smaller prep classes, learning gap classes starting to emerge, because again, going back to the building blocks of learning, we're missing chunks right now. And in order to move forward, they'll have to go back and try to recap as many of these learning blocks as possible, regardless of the content area. So we're seeing a lot more online is going to be popping up in our entire school system. A lot of differentiation, learning differentiation. People talked about it for years, but now we're forced to differentiate. Our curriculum and our lesson plans and our delivery will start to pop up, and a lot of smaller remedial settings are going to start popping up, even if it's online, to help recap some of the learning gaps that the COVID is creating right now for most students who are not in school.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to toss it to let's go I and then Deanna as we wrap up. Give us like kind of your final thoughts on this. Go ahead, I.
I think Karla answered that question pretty well. And I just also kind of want to, everyone was talking about standard tests. I so agree. And I love one of my favorite futurists. He has this statement, Toffler, that's his last name. He said that the future, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. That is something I love so much, and I try to stick to when it comes to educating students and my own children. It's really the journey of learning, the process of learning, learn how to learn. You know, today's information is going to be tomorrow's misinformation. If as parents and educators, we are so obsessed with learning information, and that skill will be easily replaced. It is already happening, you know, being replaced by AI, but really start to become more obsessed with learn, unlearn, and relearn.
That's so good. That's so good. And you're 100% right. So Deanna, let's wrap it up with you. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania, from what I've heard from Governor Wolf, again, similar, there's not going to be any, consequences for for not being able to take the standardized testing. From what I understand too, even when it comes to grading this year in Pennsylvania, I think that it is going to be a wash. It'll be very interesting next year trying to figure out the skill sets for our kids when they go into the classrooms. Karla, I was thinking the same thing. What are the sizes of classrooms going to be? Who will attend school versus ones who will choose to attend online? I don't necessarily think that it should be just those kids who have a device. I do think that there are lots of strengths that take place when people interact with other people. So it'll be really interesting to see, which kids maybe will have access to or be able to attend in a regular school building, and what will that look like necessarily. Unfortunately, right now, and I hate to admit it, but at the same time, it is what it is, and it is a blessing, is that our schools are also the places where our most vulnerable kids are fed and are also taken care of, for lack of a better word. I don't want to really, I hate to say that. But for people who are out of the home and working, which, we mentioned that, Karla, those who are working from home now. But for those kids who have parents who will go back to the field actually, and will go, if they haven't already been serving and in service fields, and also thinking of careers that will actually take place and be launched out of COVID, there will, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there will be brand new careers and jobs that we haven't even thought of right now that will take place because of coronavirus. What does it mean for our schools to actually be places for children to be safe in some respects, eating and learning at the same time? It'll be very interesting. It'll be interesting to figure out. On my call this morning, there are several churches in Philadelphia whose buildings are empty. And they're saying if we can keep numbers down, and if our congregants are starting to go back to work and there are small children who don't want to be at home, can our empty churches be places where smaller gatherings of children can, even if they are just online together, but they're actually in a place where it's safe and where they can eat maybe a meal. It's just, it's interesting to think about on a large scale in the inner cities for kids and for organizations. So I just have one more book that I'm going to hear me and all my stuff. This has been such a great resource for my kids and I to learn about understanding how to reason. You know, like, how do you reason? How do you point out the errors of somebody else's thinking in an argument? And they're called fallacies. And it's like when you watch a commercial on TV, what are they trying to sell you? They're saying that this is like how much money down and how many, you know, a month. They're really, you know, they're not telling you the whole truth. So like we've done this with our kids just watching TV. And you just look at a commercial and say, what are they trying to sell me? They're trying to sell me happiness. They're trying to sell me love. They're trying to sell me, you know, all this. I'm going to be thinner if I take this or drink that or do this or whatever. And it's kind of a great way to have your children begin to think differently and analyze things where, you know, sometimes we're a culture of like, we believe everything that's told to us. This was one of the earliest things that I allowed my children to start to do this higher level thinking. It was like older elementary, middle, and high school. And my kids now can spot a hole in an argument anywhere. They're like, come on, you gotta.
Deanna, that's kind of my feel now. We are trying to sell you the car, but at the same time, we want you to think that you're going to be happier because you got the car.
Right. That's right.
I mean, even things like that, when, you know, what we're giving those skills to our kids as they get older is that higher order thinking that really, I don't think math and language arts or anything is really going to teach our kids. It's really those kinds of questions. Yeah. It's a great workbook. I didn't show the author down at the bottom, but this is the larger picture of the whole book. But
great.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's great. And guys, just to wrap this up, because we've been going and we've been given so much value that we just gotta wrap this thing up. We might have to do a second one, right? We might have to give people more info. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we just talked about on this call and on this webinar is really about putting some of this accountability back on the parents, right? What we're going to see after this whole time, after COVID, there's going to be changes. Like Deanna said, there's going to be new industries. There's going to be new things to learn. The content has to change. Social distancing will be a norm. Online classes will be a norm. Like, there are going to be so many things that are going to become normal that as parents, we have to be flexible. We have to be flexible. We have to continue to want to learn and grow and learn about how to educate our children better. That's really what this is going to come down to. And if instead of having that anxiety or that fear or that worry that you're not going to be able to do something, or you're scared about how your child is going to adapt, you have to adapt and start to see the opportunities as parents, right? See the opportunities, see the great things that can come from this, see how the changes in you being able to individualize your child's learning. Instead of putting them in a system, you can actually individualize their learning so your child can become the best version of themselves, so that they can learn how they learn, so that no one is telling them you have to fit in this mold, you have to do this. Now we're going to really get a chance as parents. If you're up to it, all the parents that are listening to me, if you're up to it, it's really the time to grab a hold of your child, grab a hold of the learning, start to mentor, start to really walk them down this process, and not just throwing it on your public school or your teacher or the person that, you know, you were too busy to really jump in. And so you're just going to kind of pawn it off on them. Times have changed, guys. Times have changed. And it takes all of us. It's going to take the village to raise every child. It's going to take all these teachers, all these educators to find new ways to talk to parents and children at the same time. So I want to thank all of you that are on this call You have been so instrumental in just adding value in this quick hour and a half that we've been together. So I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for all of you out there watching, right, feel free to reach out to them. I'm sure everyone's on social media, connect with them, ask your questions, but we really want you to be able to grab hold of your life and your child's education, and really let's start to move forward into the positive, the right direction. So we're going to sign off for today. Hopefully everyone got a lot of value. Again, reach out to any of us if you have further questions, but we want to make sure that you and your children and your family continue to prosper during this uncertain time, especially in education. Okay, so we love you guys. We talk soon. All right, take care.
All right, thank you.
Good to see everyone.
You too.